What if I told you that the person you think you are isn't the full story? Think about this for a second. Have you ever caught yourself doing something completely out of character? Maybe snapping at a loved one, feeling jealous over something silly, or having a dark thought that shocked you? It's like there's another version of you lurking beneath the surface, one you don't fully understand. Carl Jung called this the shadow. It's the part of you that stays hidden, your suppressed desires, your repressed emotions, your fears, your envy, even your untapped potential. The things you don't want to admit about yourself, they don't disappear. They just move into the shadows of your mind. And here's the thing, if you don't face your shadow, it will control you without you even realizing it. Today, we're diving deep into Jung's shadow theory, what it is, why it matters, and how you can use it to transform your life. Stay with me. This is about to get personal. Chapter 1. What is the shadow self? Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of all time, believed that every human has two sides. The conscious self. This is the version of ourselves that we show to the world. It includes our personality, our beliefs, and how we want to be perceived. The unconscious self. This is the part of our mind that we don't fully understand. It holds our repressed emotions, hidden fears, suppressed desires, and even forgotten memories. Jung called the dark, hidden part of the unconscious mind the shadow. Think of it this way. Imagine your mind is like an iceberg. The tip of the iceberg, the part above water, is your conscious self. This is the part you control, the version of yourself that you are aware of. But underneath the water, there's a huge unseen mass. That's your unconscious mind, and inside it lies your shadow self. But where does this shadow come from? How the shadow self is formed. From the moment we are born, we start learning what is acceptable and what is not. For example, as a child, if you were told good kids don't get angry, you might have learned to suppress your anger. If you were taught that crying is a sign of weakness, you may have pushed down your emotions to appear strong. If your parents or teachers made you feel like being too loud or too confident was bad, you may have started shrinking yourself to avoid judgment. Over time, you created a socially acceptable version of yourself, one that fit into what your family, culture, or society wanted from you. But what happened to all those parts of yourself that didn't fit the mold? They didn't disappear. They went into your shadow. What gets hidden in the shadow? The shadow holds everything you deny or reject about yourself. This can include negative traits like anger, selfishness, envy, and arrogance. Unprocessed emotions like sadness, guilt, or shame. Unacknowledged fears like rejection, failure, or abandonment. Positive qualities you've suppressed, such as confidence, ambition, or assertiveness, because you were taught they were bad. For example, if you were raised to believe that being humble is important, you might have repressed your natural confidence. If you were taught that always being kind is the right way to live, you might have pushed down your anger and frustration. If you were told to be logical and not emotional, you may have buried your feelings deep inside, avoiding vulnerability. But here's the problem. Repressing something doesn't make it disappear. It just hides it, like shoving things into a closet and locking the door. And just like an overstuffed closet, your shadow will eventually spill out, often in ways you don't expect. Why ignoring your shadow is dangerous? Most people go through life believing that their conscious mind is in control. They think, I'm a kind person. I don't get jealous, I never get angry. But if you don't acknowledge your shadow, it will find its own way to express itself. For example, repressed anger can turn into passive aggressiveness, sarcasm, subtle digs at people, or silent resentment. Unacknowledged jealousy can make you constantly criticize others or feel bitter about their success. A suppressed need for attention can lead to manipulation or unhealthy relationships. This is why Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In other words, if you don't become aware of your shadow, it will control your emotions, decisions, and relationships without you even realizing it. This is why shadow work, facing and integrating your shadow, is one of the most powerful forms of self-awareness and personal growth. because when you acknowledge your hidden parts, you take back control. So how does the shadow show up in everyday life? And how can you recognize when it's influencing your thoughts and behavior? Let's talk about that next. Chapter 2, how the shadow shows up in daily life. Now that we understand what the shadow is, the next big question is, how does it affect us in real life? The tricky thing about the shadow is that we often don't realize it's influencing us. Since it operates in the unconscious mind, it doesn't show up in obvious ways. Instead, it sneaks into our behavior, thoughts, and emotions in ways that can be subtle, confusing, and sometimes destructive. So how do you know when your shadow is at work? 1. Projection, seeing your shadow in others. One of the most common ways the shadow reveals itself is through projection. Projection happens when you see in others what you refuse to see in yourself. Instead of owning a quality, you push it onto someone else. For example, if you constantly judge people for being arrogant, it might be because you've repressed your own need to feel important or be recognized. If you find yourself annoyed by people who seek attention, maybe it's because you've suppressed your own desire to be seen. If you criticize others for being lazy, could it be that deep down, you fear being seen as unproductive yourself? Think of it like a mirror. The things that trigger you in others often reflect something you haven't accepted within yourself. Projection is a defense mechanism. It allows us to push our shadow onto someone else so we don't have to face it. But by doing this, we miss an important opportunity for self-awareness. 2. Emotional triggers. Overreacting to small things. Have you ever had a situation where someone made a harmless comment, but you felt irrationally angry, embarrassed, or upset? That's a clue that your shadow's being poked. For example, if someone says you're being selfish and you explode with anger, it might be because a hidden part of you actually fears being selfish. If someone teases you about being wrong and you feel deeply ashamed, maybe it's because you've suppressed the fear of looking stupid. If you feel personally attacked when someone is assertive, it might be because you were taught that standing up for yourself is bad. So seeing someone else do it triggers you. Why does this happen? Because your unconscious mind is reacting to something you've buried. Your emotional reaction is stronger than the situation actually calls for. The next time you feel intensely triggered, instead of reacting immediately, ask yourself, why am I feeling this way? Is this reaction actually about this moment, or is it touching something deeper inside me? Your triggers are like breadcrumbs leading you back to your shadow. If you follow them, you'll start uncovering parts of yourself that need healing. 3. Passive-aggressive behavior and self-sabotage. Sometimes when we suppress emotions like anger, jealousy, or insecurity, they don't disappear. They just come out in less obvious ways. Let's say you were raised to believe that nice people don't get angry. So instead of expressing anger in a healthy way, you might give people the silent treatment instead of telling them how you feel, make sarcastic or backhanded comments instead of being direct, agree to things you don't want to do, then resent people for it. This is called passive aggressiveness, and it's often a sign that your shadow is trying to express itself in sneaky ways. Another way the shadow shows up is through self-sabotage. If your shadow holds limiting beliefs like, I don't deserve success, or I'm not good enough, it might cause you to procrastinate on important tasks because deep down, you fear failure. Push away relationships because you don't believe you're worthy of love. Stay stuck in toxic patterns because they feel familiar and safe. Your shadow doesn't always show up as an obvious villain. Sometimes it disguises itself as self-doubt, perfectionism, or bad luck. But the truth is, if you don't face these hidden parts of yourself, they'll keep running the show from behind the scenes. 4. Envy and resentment, the shadow's hidden message. Let's talk about envy, a feeling we don't like to admit, but one that holds powerful lessons about our shadow. Have you ever scrolled through social media and felt a pang of jealousy? Maybe someone got their dream job, or is in a happy relationship, or looks confident and carefree. Instead of feeling happy for them, you feel bitter, annoyed, or resentful. But here's the thing, jealousy isn't always bad. Jealousy is actually a signal from your shadow telling you, this is something you secretly desire. but you've convinced yourself you can't have it. This is a quality you've suppressed in yourself. For example, if you envy someone's confidence, maybe you've hidden your own self-worth. If you feel resentful of someone's success, maybe you've buried your own ambition. If you dislike someone who is carefree and fun, maybe you've suppressed your own playful side. Instead of ignoring envy, ask yourself, what is this feeling trying to show me? Am I suppressing a part of myself that I actually need to embrace? Envy isn't always about wanting what someone else has. It's often about reconnecting with a part of yourself that you've lost. The too much effect. Overcompensating for hidden insecurities. Another sign of the shadow is when someone tries too hard to prove they are the opposite of what they fear. For example, someone who constantly brags about their intelligence may actually be hiding deep insecurities about not feeling smart enough. So someone who overly preaches about kindness might be secretly struggling with suppressed anger or resentment. Someone who acts overly independent and refuses help may have a hidden fear of being seen as weak or vulnerable. This is called overcompensation, when we go to extremes to hide parts of ourselves that we don't want to admit exist. If you ever catch yourself trying really hard to prove something, ask, what am I afraid people will see if I stop acting this way? Is this really who I am, or am I covering up something deeper? Why recognizing your shadow is the first step to freedom. The most important takeaway from this chapter is, your shadow is always showing up in your life. You just have to learn how to spot it. The more you ignore it, the more control it has over you. But the more you become aware of it, the more power you have to change. So here's a challenge. Over the next week, pay attention to the things that trigger you, the qualities you criticize in others, the moments when you feel irrationally emotional, the times when you act out of character. Every time this happens, ask yourself, could this be my shadow trying to get my attention? By doing this, you start to bring the unconscious into the conscious, and that's the first step to true self-awareness and transformation. Now that we've identified the ways the shadow appears in daily life, the next question is, what do we do about it? That's what we'll cover in the next chapter. Chapter 3, why facing your shadow is life-changing. Here's the truth. The more you ignore your shadow, the more power it has over you. You might think you're a kind, loving person, but if you don't acknowledge your hidden resentments, they will leak out in passive-aggressive ways. You might see yourself as selfless, but if you repress your need for boundaries, you'll end up feeling drained and resentful. Jung believed that true self-awareness comes from integrating your shadow, not fighting it, not pretending it doesn't exist, but accepting that you are both light and dark, good and bad. Think of your mind like a house. Your conscious mind is the part you show to guests, the clean, decorated rooms. But the shadow is the messy basement, full of things you haven't sorted through. Most people pretend the basement doesn't exist. But the people who do the real work, they go down there, they face the mess, and they come out stronger. Chapter 4, how to integrate your shadow. By now, we've learned what the shadow is and how it shows up in our daily lives. But here's the big question. What happens when we finally face it? Most people avoid their shadow because it's uncomfortable. It holds everything we've buried, our fears, insecurities, and repressed emotions. It's the part of us we don't want to see. But here's the truth. Ignoring your shadow doesn't make it go away. It just makes it control you from the background. The real transformation begins when you consciously confront your shadow and begin the process of integrating it. 1. Self-acceptance. Learning to embrace all of you. Many of us walk around feeling divided. We have our acceptable self, the version of us that is kind, responsible, and well-behaved. But we also have the hidden parts, the anger, jealousy, and desires we try to suppress. When you don't acknowledge your shadow, you create inner conflict. A part of you is always resisting, hiding, or pretending. Facing your shadow brings wholeness. Carl Jung said, "I'd rather be whole than good." This doesn't mean you should become a bad person. It means true growth isn't about being perfect. It's about accepting all parts of yourself, even the messy ones. For example, if you accept that you have anger, you can learn to express it in a healthy way instead of suppressing it. If you acknowledge that you sometimes feel jealous, you can understand what it's trying to teach you. If you recognize that you crave attention, you can find a way to meet that need without shame. When you stop fighting against yourself, you feel lighter, more authentic, and more at peace. 2. Greater emotional control and freedom. Think about the last time you had a strong emotional reaction to something. Maybe someone said something that really triggered you, and you couldn't stop thinking about it for days. That's often your shadow reacting. When you haven't faced your shadow, it controls your emotions without you realizing it. You get defensive, overreact, or feel hurt without fully understanding why. But once you've done shadow work, something changes. Instead of reacting automatically, you can pause and ask, why do I feel this way? Is this really about this moment, or is it touching something deeper? What part of me is trying to get my attention? This awareness gives you power over your emotions. Instead of letting them control you, you can work with them. Imagine how freeing it would be to no longer get triggered so easily, to feel emotions without them overwhelming you. That's the power of shadow integration. 3. More authentic and fulfilling relationships. Unhealed shadows damage relationships because they make us project our issues onto other people. For example, if you fear being abandoned, you might become clingy or overly dependent in relationships. If you repress your anger, you might bottle up resentment until it explodes. If you deny your need for validation, you might unconsciously manipulate others to get attention. But once you face your shadow, relationships become healthier. Instead of blaming others for making you feel a certain way, you start taking responsibility for your emotions. You stop projecting, stop playing mind games, and stop expecting people to fill the gaps you haven't addressed in yourself. This leads to deeper connections, honest communication, and relationships based on truth rather than hidden wounds. 4. Unlocking hidden potential and confidence. Here's something surprising. Your shadow doesn't just hold your fears and insecurities, it also holds your hidden strengths. Many people suppress positive qualities because they were once told those qualities were wrong. For example, if you were punished for being outspoken, you might have repressed your natural leadership skills. If you were taught that ambition is selfish, you might have suppressed your drive for success. If you were made fun of for being emotional, you might have disconnected from your creativity and empathy. When you face your shadow, you reclaim these lost parts of yourself. Suddenly, you start feeling more confident because you're no longer holding back the qualities that make you powerful. You stop fearing judgment. You stop apologizing for who you are. You stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. That's when you truly step into your full potential. 5. A deep sense of inner peace. At the root of all this, shadow work leads to peace. Many of us feel like we're constantly at war with ourselves. We carry guilt, shame, fear, and emotional baggage that we don't fully understand. But the more you face your shadow, the more you realize there was never anything wrong with you. You are not broken. You don't have to fight against yourself anymore. You learn to embrace your emotions instead of fearing them. You learn to accept your imperfections instead of hiding them. You learn to live as your true, whole self without shame. This is why shadow integration is one of the most powerful journeys you can take. When you stop running from yourself, you finally find peace. The choice to face your shadow. At the end of the day, you have two choices. 1. Ignore your shadow and let it control you from the background. 2. Face it, integrate it, and become a more complete version of yourself. The second path isn't easy. It takes self-reflection, courage, and honesty. But it is life-changing. So, what's next? How do you start integrating your shadow and using it to grow? That's what we'll explore in the final chapter. How to do shadow work and transform your life. Chapter 5. The power of embracing your full self. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." In other words, if you don't face your shadow, it will control your choices, your relationships, and your happiness without you even realizing it. But when you start doing the work, when you bring light into the dark corners of your mind, you take your power back. You stop letting old wounds run your life. You stop projecting your insecurities onto others. You become more whole, more real, more you. And that's the real power of shadow work. The journey of shadow work never ends. Here's something important to remember. Shadow work is not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process, a lifelong journey of self-awareness, self-acceptance, and self-growth. There will always be new layers of your shadow to uncover. As you grow and evolve, your unconscious mind will continue to reveal new things. That's okay. That's part of the process. The key is to stay curious, stay open, and keep doing the work. Every time you confront a hidden fear, reclaim a lost part of yourself, or break free from an old pattern, you are becoming a more complete, more powerful version of yourself. So ask yourself, are you ready to face your shadow? Because once you do, you'll never see yourself or the world the same way again. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And if this video resonated with you, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. We're just getting started. See you in the next one.